ever wondered, what makes a great leader? Have you ever wondered what makes a great entrepreneur? Well, I have, and I've studied one of the people in the world who I believe was one of the greatest entrepreneurs and one of the greatest leaders of all times. I just want you to listen to this for a moment and see what you remember.
You wish upon a star, makes no difference.
Do you remember the Sunday nights? What are your memories about that? I can remember being with my parents and my eldest brother, and we would watch Disneyland in front of the fire, and it was one of the few times my parents used to fight a lot, and one of the few times my parents didn't fight, and we all got along well as a family. Disney united people. Disney was one of the greatest leaders of all time. He was a futurist, he was an entrepreneur. And I want to talk about Walt Disney today. This man had influence more than any politician. Why? Because he was an optimist. He didn't pretend to be an optimist. He was the eternal optimist. He used to have a dream about doing things. He wasn't a great military leader, but he was a great leader, and he influenced more people's lives than any politician or any great military leader ever has. Because why? His legacy still lives on today, doesn't it? You can't think about Disney without thinking about having a good time. You cannot go to Disneyland and not have a good time. What I've learned is that the Disney experience is this, is that if you come into contact with Disney, you will feel better and your life will get better for Disney. How can we apply that to our own lives? See, Walt Disney wasn't born with a silver spoon. He had a tough upbringing. He had to work hard. He had to get up sometimes at 2 o'clock in the morning to deliver papers in snowdrifts that were 6 foot high. And at times he felt like just lying down and going to sleep, but he couldn't. And if he didn't do his job properly, what his father used to do was beat him with a hammer until the day Walt was old enough and strong enough, and he stopped his father from beating him with a hammer, and he said, "You won't beat us boys ever again with a hammer." But even though he had a really tough upbringing, what Walt did, he loved his parents and he looked after them for the rest of their lives once he got financially secure. He was an ambulance driver in the First World War, and that's why in some of the early cartoons you see Walt Disney, you see an ambulance driving along and it's going over rough roads. That's because he was an ambulance driver in the First World War. His dream, and he had a vision for drawing. When he was a young student, a teacher said to him, "Draw a flower," and he drew a flower with a face on it, and that's where the silly symphonies came from. And he said these things are alive, and his teacher berated him for that. But he dreamed of being a drawer one day. He dreamed of being a cartoonist. He dreamed of making things come alive. And he said, "We are creating happiness." He said, "Roy, what we're doing is we're selling happiness in the world today." So we're going to look at 7 components of leadership that Walt Disney had in place. The first one is vision. Not all visionaries are leaders, but all leaders are visionaries. And you've got to have a vision for where you want to go. What's your vision on where you want to take your companies? What's your vision on where you want to take your people and the people you are leading? When asked how he achieved so much in one lifetime, he answered, "I dream, I test my dreams against my beliefs. I dare to take risks, and I execute my vision to make my dreams become a reality." In other words, he dreamed, he believed, he dared, and he did. Dream, believe, dare, do were 4 words that he lived by, and I think we could live by those words as well. He also said, if he shares his ideas with somebody and they say, "Walt, that's a great idea," he knows he's not dreaming big enough. When somebody said to him, "Walt, that's a silly idea, you'll never achieve it," he said, "Now I'm onto something because nobody else has ever done it before." What can we create in our lives, in our businesses, that we can dream big so that people say we're crazy, and yet we can create a whole new market for something? What can we do with that? He said, "I dream." He began with a vision for the future. "I test my dreams against my beliefs." What is my belief? Can I do it? And he made sure his vision was consistent with his beliefs, his core values and his integrity. When his wife Lillian said to him, "Walt, you are crazy wanting to build a fun park," she said, "There's no decent fun parks in the world." He said, That's it. He said, that's it. That's exactly why I want to build a fun park. It's because there are no decent fun parks in the world. And this is why I will build the best fun park in the world. And he put everything on the line to build Disneyland. He took risks. He had a good mate called Art Linkletter. And he drove Art Linkletter to Disneyland one day. But this was when Disneyland was an orange orchard. And on the way there, Walt was explaining to Art exactly what Disneyland would look like. He told him what Sleeping Beauty's castle would look like. He told him what Frontierland would look like. He said Adventureland will look like this. He said, I'm going to have a monorail. I'm going to have a railway going around here. And as they were doing that, they were walking. They were actually walking through an orange grove. And Walt Linkletter thought to himself, Walt Disney, you're a poor, deluded fool. Walt Disney said to Art Linkletter that day, he said, Art, I haven't got any more money, but you want to buy all the land around here because it's going to be valuable one day. They're going to want it for hotels. They're going to want it for restaurants. And Art Linkletter didn't take his advice, and he said every step he took that day cost him $3 million through not taking Walt's advice to invest in that land. Isn't that just amazing? $3 million through not doing that. I dare to take risks. He acted boldly, betting on himself to win. Now, he always bet on himself to win. When he was backed into a corner, he would always be bold. There was a guy by the name of Charlie Mintz, and Charlie Mintz ripped him off blind because Walt Disney went to get a pay rise for their cartoons to the distributors in New York, and Charlie Mintz was the head of this distribution company, and Walt Disney needed to get a pay rise from $2,200 to $2,500. And Charlie Mintz said, no, we're now going to pay you $1,800 a cartoon. And Walt said, we can't do it for that. We can't supply you. He said, well, unless you supply us, I'm going to steal all your cartoonists. I've got them all signed up. If you don't agree to work for me for $1,800 a cartoon, Walt said, take them. He said, take my cartoonists. You can steal them, you can take them, but he said, bear in mind, he said, keep these words in mind. He said, what they've done to me, they'll do to you one day. And that's exactly what happened. Years later, he saw Charlie Mintz, who was broke and he was worn out because these cartoonists did exactly the same thing. But you see, Walt Disney had a bit of a problem because his brother Roy was back in California waiting for Walt to come back with all his money to pay the bills. And Walt telegrammed Roy and said, everything's fine, Roy, I'm on my way back. And he thought, I've got to come up with something on the train on the way back. So he hops on the train and he comes up with a mouse. And he thinks, oh, I'm going to build an empire around this mouse. And he called it Mortimer Mouse. And his wife, Lillian, said, well, you can't call it Mortimer. Mickey is a better name. And so she actually named it Mickey Mouse. And Walt Disney built that empire on a mouse. Can you imagine being Roy, waiting for the money to come back, and Walt walks in and says, no worries, everything's fine, I've got it. And he puts a sketch of Mickey Mouse on Roy's desk. Wow. If you were the financial controller, how would you feel about that? You would probably have a few words to say, wouldn't you? And I'm sure Roy did. But Walt Disney built his empire around that mouse, Mickey Mouse. I execute my vision to make my dreams come true. So he executes his vision to make his dreams come true. He focused all his energies and those of his organisation on turning his dreams into reality. Walt was the grand master of vision. He had determination, courage and persistence to turn his vision into reality. He wasn't a great cartoonist and he wasn't a great painter. But what he was a visionary. And if he couldn't create it himself, he used to tell people what he wanted created. And he said, now go to work, do your best, and come to me when you've got it. And then when they came to him, he'd say, no, it's not quite how I want it. Go back and do better on that. And he was striving for excellence all the time. How are we striving for excellence every day in our businesses? How are we doing that? To those people who work with him, he was the greatest coach of all times. And as a leader, we have to be great coaches at all times. He was able to draw out the talents of his people. He would say, just do your best work and then trump it. Do it better. Give me your best work, bring it to me, and then I'll say, do better. You can do better than this. And he brought out the best in everybody. And this is a leader's role. A leader's job is to bring out the very best in every person. The next point is communication skills. Walt was a walking storyteller. He loved telling stories. His young nephew, who was 10 years old, was home in bed sick, and he had the idea of making Pinocchio into a feature. And so he went and he acted out Pinocchio all one afternoon, telling this young 10-year-old nephew exactly how Pinocchio would be. And the day came when Pinocchio was finished, and Walt took his nephew to the theatre to have a look at it. And at the end of the movie, Walt was really excited. And he said to his nephew, "What do you think?" The nephew said, "Nowhere near as good as the story you told, Uncle Walt. He was a great storyteller. He could light the fire of imagination in anybody he spoke to. Because he was passionate about his dreams and visions, and he was so confident. He was on a winner. He was a great salesperson." He was a great salesperson. Walt Disney was building Disneyland, and he needed extra money to build it, and the banks wouldn't give him any. So what he did was he went out to the TV stations and he sold the television rights to Disneyland. And by going to the TV stations, he was able to finish it off. And by doing that, what happened was he got coverage nationally, all over America, for the opening of Disneyland. Brilliant. Greatest salesperson, one of the greatest salespeople in the world he was. When they opened Disneyland, the day they opened it, Roy Disney couldn't get there because there was a traffic jam, and Roy thought hardly anybody was going to turn up. They had sold 11,000 tickets, and somebody was printing the tickets and reselling them. Because 28,000 people turned up, it was a near disaster. They ran out of food, they ran out of drink, they ran out of a lot of things. And Walt was so overjoyed. In fact, the morning that Disneyland was open, Walt was locked in his room because they'd just painted the door in his room in Main Street in Disneyland, and he couldn't open it. So he had to get the maintenance people in to open it to let him out to greet the guests as they walked in. And he always called them guests who were coming into Disneyland. And that's the feeling you get when you go to Disneyland. And with the television rights, what he did was he started the Disney show on October the 27th, 1954. And Disneyland opened on July the 17th, 1955. And he basically had all this marketing in place so that people would come to Disneyland. And the first television transmission was on January the 7th, 1927. A guy by the name of Farnsworth did it. And the first transmission was of Mickey Mouse in the Steamboat Willie cartoon. And that's what the first transmission of TV of all time was. And then he had people skills. Walt wasn't a great artist or a painter, but he was a great communicator. And he realised delegation required the ability to trust others. As a leader, you can't do it all yourself. Walt had the ability to delegate and manage results and inspire loyalty and create an atmosphere of creative freedom and information, and turn a collection of talented individuals into a team. This is what leadership and entrepreneurship is all about, turning individuals into a team. And Walt's ability in all these areas is very evident. There was a time, around the time when Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis were splitting up, and somebody said to Walt Disney, "Can you ever see the day where you and Roy will go your separate ways?" He said, "No way." He said, "We might fight a bit and we might have a few arguments." But he said, "There's a guardian angel looking after us. And we don't know whether it's Roy's guardian angel or my guardian angel, but we ain't going our separate ways. We're going to stick together forever." And they did. And they worked together as a great team. Walt, the visionary. Roy was the manager. He was the financial guy and he had to look after things. Walt came up with the ideas. Roy had to find the money to put them into practice. And we all need a guardian angel. Good character. Walt Disney stood for integrity. He was worthy, honest and true. It's because of this excellent character that Disney products are still popular today. It doesn't matter where you go. I was in a DVD store just recently and I was looking for something Disney. I wanted to actually show some old clips of Disney and I couldn't find any, but as soon as I mentioned Disney, the girls' faces lit up. And they were telling me about their favourite Disney shows. And some of the shows I'd never heard of because they're Disney shows today. But Disney means good entertainment. You hear Disney and you mention Disney and you see the smiles come on people's faces. Competence. Walt once said leadership means that a group, large or small, is willing to entrust authority to a person who has shown judgment, wisdom, personal appeal and proven competence. Walt demonstrated his competence and competitiveness through a strong track record a commitment to hard work, a commitment to personal growth, continual personal growth, a commitment to winning, and a commitment to excellence. Everything was about quality. Even today, as old movies are entertaining, aren't they? When you see an old Disney movie, because the quality he insisted upon when he made them. Walt once said, courage is the main quality of leadership. Courage is to initiate something and keep it going. It's pioneering spirit. It's an adventurous spirit. The courage to blaze new ways in a land of opportunity. If you're not bold, you're no leader. And you've got to be bold to be a leader. Walt believed in himself. He figured if he liked it, the audience would like it as well. He said, I don't have a lot of time for critics. What I have a lot of time for is the audience. And I'll take my chances with the public. Because the critics didn't think much of Walt Disney when he first started, but he always took his chance with the public and he saw what the public liked. Walt said, we're not trying to entertain the critics. I'll take my chances with the public. And he did take his chances with the public, and it paid off fantastically well for him. Walt demonstrated that true success lies where no one else has gone before. Success lies in doing what everyone said can't be done. Everyone said they can't be done. Walt Disney wanted a show on space made, and he got a scientist called von Braun to come up with 3 space programs called Man in Space, Tomorrow the Moon, Mars and Beyond. And they had over 45 million viewers watch these space programs. 45 million viewers. And when von Braun was watching Apollo 11 land on the moon, he rang one of his producers and said, they're following our script of exactly how we said it would happen and how they would go to the moon. NASA is following our script. The real tragedy is to fail by not trying. We've got to have a go. You've got to have a go in life. Walt bet everything, including his studio, on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And the financial blew out. Initially, he thought it was going to cost him $250,000 to produce. When it hit $500,000, he said he stopped going to see Roy because Roy was in a panic about how he was going to finance it. He had 700 cartoonists working on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He was paying them in stocks of Disney. And he said to them, these stocks will be really worth something one day. His cleaner, for example, his cleaner took stocks in payment. She was worth $5 million when she died from the stocks that Walt Disney had given her. It ended up costing $1.5 million to produce Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Walt said Roy just went quiet when it went past the $1 million mark. They had everything on the line. And what happened was Walt Disney was really keen to find out how Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was going to go. So when it was finished, he did a preview of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in a small theatre by a university in Los Angeles. And he filled the theatre with the university students, and the film started rolling. What Walt Disney did was he was looking at it from the projector's point of view. Then he said, I want to see it from the front. So he went around, he went behind the curtain at the front, and he peeked through to see whether people were laughing at the jokes, to see whether people were smiling, whether they were crying, whether the gags were working, and everything was going fine. And he went back up to the projectionist, and he's sitting in there, and he's really excited, everything's going great, the excitement in the room is fantastic. And then some people walk out. And he says to the projectionist, I'm ruined, this is it. It's okay till about halfway, and then people are just walking out. And the projectionist said, why don't you go and ask them while they're walking out? So he went down and he said to this young lady, he said, son, don't you like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? He said, oh no, Mr. Disney, this is absolutely fantastic. He said, well, why are you walking out? He said, the dormitory closes at 10 o'clock and it's now 10 to 10. It's going to take me at least 10 minutes to walk back to the dormitory. I've got to get back there. And so the theatre emptied because they had to get back to the dormitory. But it was a smashing success. It was a smashing success. And Snow White went on to be a huge success. And it helped in the building of Disneyland and the building studios. Walt Disney was one of the founders of stereo. He wanted stereo in his movies, so he got that done and he had stereo go into his movies. When television began, Hollywood trembled, but Walt embraced television and he knew that he could really do something with television. So what he did was he embraced it. So the Disneyland TV series debuted on October 27, 1954, which transformed the Disney Corporation in 3 different ways. One, it was brilliant entertainment, with its synergy sold the Disneyland theme parks to the public. And can you remember that? I don't know, you may not be old enough, but can you remember watching Disneyland on a Sunday night and you would see the snippets of Disneyland? You watched and you would see it and you think, one day I want to be there. And I can remember as a kid, I always thought I want to visit Disneyland one day. It would be such a treat. Great marketing. The Davy Crockett franchise grossed over $100 million in product sales. $100 million in those days. It was a huge amount of money. And Walt Disney became known as Uncle Walt to generations of people around the world. And a few of the shows that made Disney famous were Zorro. Can you remember Zorro? Maybe, maybe you can't. Wagon Train, Maverick, Gunsmoke. Walt never feared the future, he embraced it. He always embraced the future. He wanted to get on with things. Then he had a servant's heart. And the ultimate test of leadership is this. Does this person have the heart of a servant? Because to be a great leader, you've got to be a servant. And if you don't have the servant's heart, you're not a leader, you're just a boss. And Walt is remembered for the way he helped people. He helped some of his staff's children go through university. There's a story that one day one of his gardeners was being berated by one of his executives. And Walt said to this executive, just remember this whole empire was built on a mouse. And Walt went and helped the gardener and apologised to the gardener for the way this guy had been rude to him. Because Walt cared about people, and true leadership is caring about people. Entrepreneurs care about people. Walt never acted like a big shot. He had high standards of excellence. He was never demanding. He never wanted people to go out of their way to serve him. In fact, he would go out of his way to serve them. The plus factor. He said, you can do it better, and then trump it. What's the plus factor in our lives? What's the plus factor in your life? What's the plus factor you can bring into your company right now? Walt had a burning desire in everything he did. He was always thinking, we can do it better. As the Disney Corporation, we can do it better. Every company should be thinking all the time, we can do it better. He was adamant about quality. He always found new ways for the plus experience. He wanted to anticipate what his guests would want. And that's why Disneyland, if you go there today, there's a parade in Disney every afternoon. And the people who were advising him at that stage said, no, Walt, nobody would want a parade. Nobody would be expecting it. He said, that's it. That's it. Nobody will be expecting it. That's why we're going to do a parade every afternoon. And they did a Disney parade, and they still do a Disney parade every afternoon. And that's why Disney was and still is a top training organisation. They realised it's better to train their staff than it is to try and find new guests. And if you've been to Disneyland, you know what it's like. The staff there are just exceptional. You can drop a piece of paper and turn around and the piece of paper is gone. I remember in 1995 when we took the kids there, I took my mum along as well. And my mum was not feeling well one afternoon because it was really hot, and this was in Anaheim. And she sat down. And next minute there's a helper, a Disney helper, sitting right beside my mother, helping her out, giving her a cold glass of water and really concerned about her, asking her whether she needs anything. This is the Disney service. I've heard you have to train for 2 years to be a part-time employee at Disney in the summer when it's busy. 2 years to get customer service right. Isn't that absolutely fantastic? And that's why they're good at selling happiness, and that's why Disney is such a popular place to visit even today. When you visit Disneyland, you see the plus factor everywhere. You see it all over the place. Walt's goal was to make sure that when you visit Disneyland, you are happier when you leave than when you got there. And you cannot, I don't care what sort of person you are, you cannot go to Disneyland and not leave with a smile on your face from ear to ear. You see, when we first went to Disney in 1995, I took the kids over there. And I had been working for 5 years to save up to take the family on a family holiday to go to Disneyland, and we travelled the United States. And we got to Disneyland. Now, since I was about 5 years old, I can remember watching the Disneyland show and can remember seeing snippets of Disneyland, seeing snippets of the Main Street, seeing snippets of Frontierland, Sleeping Beauty's castle. and all of these things. And I get into Disneyland and I'm really excited. I'm really happy to be there. And I look up Main Street and there's happy people, everybody's smiling. And I turn around and our children, our 3 children, Bronson, Jordan and Jessica, are fighting. Here I am, happiest place on earth. I look back and they're fighting. I can't believe this. So I get them in a huddle. I say, kids, come here, come here. So I get them in a huddle. I say, Dad's been working hard for 5 years to get you to come to Disneyland. And I'm really excited about coming to Disneyland. And I said, since a child, I have been dreaming of this day to be in the happiest place on earth. So you will have a good time today and you will be smiling. And every time I look at you, I want to see a smile check from ear to ear. And our daughter, Jessica, she walks off and she goes, Dad's going to have a smile check all day today. Smile check, smile check, smile check. What's your smile check? The kids gave me a plaque from my study just recently because I apparently wasn't smiling enough. So they gave me a plaque that's got a picture of Walt Disney. It's got smile check underneath. Earlier, 2012, Tina and I visited Disney World in Florida. And I don't know, I was in a bit of a grump the morning we got into Disney World. And we went in there and we're having breakfast. And Tina just said to me, smile check, and put a smile from ear to ear. You cannot be unhappy in Disneyland, Disney World or any Disney products. What's your smile check in life? How are you going to keep smiling? You're going to keep smiling from ear to ear, aren't you? So Disney has a way of making their presence felt and making people feel very, very special. You see this? This was an Orlando Magic cap that we bought just before we went to Disneyland. And I bought one for myself. I bought one for each of our sons, Bronson and Jordan. And we go to Pocahontas and we had these caps on. And what happened was my son Bronson left his hat on the bench and walked away. It was lost. We went back, couldn't find it. So every afternoon I went to Lost and Found at Disneyland. They couldn't find it and we were devastated we lost this cap. So the last day we were in Disneyland, they say fill out this lost and found form. So I put my address in. I said a blue and white Orlando Magic cap. And we travelled around the United States. I'd forgotten all about Disneyland. And what happened was the day that we got back, the day we arrived home about a month later, on our back doorstep was a brown parcel from Disneyland. And it contained a blue and white brand new Orlando Magic cap. How can we create that sort of magic in people's lives? Here it is, nearly 20 years ago. It's 17 years ago since I've been to Disneyland. I have spoken about this time and time again about how Disney created magic in our lives. How far does that go? What can we do in our own businesses to create that magic in people's lives? Our success depends on our commitment to excellence and how we treat our people. And if we can create those things like giving more than the client expects, how can we do that in our lives? How can we create more than the client expects? How can we create one of these, a Disney cap on the back door when you get home, and so somebody's talking about it for nearly 20 years after that and singing Disney's praises? What did it cost them for that cap? It might have been $10, $15, $20. And that's all. They went out and bought it and there it was on our back doorstep. Disney is fantastic. That's what we want with the plus factor. We want our clients to be talking about us in 10 years' time, in 15 years' time, because we do things that wow them. We give them the wow experience. When we're given an obstacle or a challenge, what we've got to look at it as an opportunity to implement what I call the plus factor. And that's when we just plus it. We trump it. We just make something great out of it. How can we do that? How can you do that with somebody you're working with right now? How can you create a plus factor? So to be a leader like Walt, we must have vision and be able to implement that vision and put it into practice and achieve our dreams and goals and have these 4 words in place. 1 is dream, 2 is believe, 3 is dare, and 4 is do. Dream, believe, dare, and do. I love those words. And you'll learn to love them as well. Be a great communicator. To be a great communicator, we have to be passionate about our vision. If we're not passionate and excited about our vision, how can we expect anybody else to get passionate about that? So, as a leader, As an entrepreneur, we have to be passionate about our vision. We have to be excited about it. People skills. We surround ourselves with the right people, and that's people who are better at the things we're weakest at, and then we delegate to those people. Number 4, good character. We must strive for integrity, honesty and trust in all we do, because people buy into the leader before they buy into the leader's vision. So the next one is competence. That's a good track record, a commitment to hard work, a commitment to continual personal growth, a commitment to winning, a commitment to excellence, and a commitment to the wow or the plus factor. Courage is the main quality of leadership. Courage to initiate and keep going, the courage to blaze new ways of opportunity. If you're not bold, you're not a leader. And then a leader has a servant's heart. Without a servant's heart, we're not a leader, we're just a boss. What keeps us from our dreams? Walt Disney couldn't be stopped anything short of death itself. He died on December the 15th, 1966, and even after his death, his dreams are so powerful they continue on today. So if we want to succeed like Walt, never dare give up, no matter how tough life gets. Just always persist and always succeed, striving for excellence, and dream, believe, dare and do. So take it from Walt. Get a good idea and stay with it. Dog it, work hard until it's done, and done right. And all our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them. Wouldn't we all love to be a leader and an entrepreneur like Walt Disney?